When we hear of Greece, we think of past wonders, mythological tales, the epics of Homer, and column temples, built for the many gods. In contrast, modern Greece was born in very recent year 1821, emerging from a discontented inhabitants, tired of Ottoman destruction, living in a small peninsula and an archipelago of islands, nestled in the very bottom of Europe. Some of these rebels, although may have been inspired by the ancient past or the Byzantine Greek culture, whereas many of them wanted to be free from the tight grasp of the Ottoman Empire. In this documentary, we will discuss how these people of both desires came together to achieve a common goal. This is the Greek Revolution. The Tuesday of 29th of May, 1453, saw one of the most known events in European history. Sultan Mehmed II led his army to victory after a 55-day siege of the heart of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople. With newfound technology, the cannons, the Theodosian walls that lasted for years, fell within moments. The inhabitants of Constantinople weren't safe anymore, and the Ottomans used this to their advantage to spread fear and destruction, committing many atrocities. As the Ottoman army entered the city, Constantine XI Pelagos, the last Byzantine emperor, surrendered. Many people were captured by the arriving Ottomans. According to an eyewitness account by Makarios Melazonos, quote, as soon as the Ottomans were inside the city, they began to seize and enslave every person who came their way. All who tried to resist were put to the sword. At many places, the ground could not be seen, as it was covered by heaps of corpses. End quote. As Constantinople fell, the previous Byzantine Empire was turned into a mere vassal state of the Ottomans, in direct control of the Sublime Porte. Although the Ottomans occupied most of the Greek territory, the Ionian Islands and a few possessions in the Greek Peloponnese, along with Cyprus and Crete, were under Venetian possessions of Stato de Mar. The Ottomans, although, had occupied most of Greece and the Balkans. The Port-Ermani Peninsula and most of the Peloponnese was under Ottoman suzerainty, their vassalship. Under Ottoman laws in the order of the Sultans, the Greek and the Balkan Orthodox Christians were put together in a community called the Rummelin, essentially controlled by the Ecumenical Patriarch, which is the religious leader of the Orthodox Christians in Constantinople. Greek Orthodox Christians, as well as other people except Muslims, were subject to high taxes and occasionally even forced conversion. If the taxes weren't paid, their person would face a death sentence. Overall, the Greeks were considered an inferior people to the Muslims and the Ottomans in the empire. Many of the Greeks were Orthodox Christians. They weren't allowed to use weapons or ride horses. The treatment of Greek in the empire varied a lot, with each sultan ascending to the throne, like Sultan Selim I, who heavily persecuted Christians and attempted to remove Christianity entirely from the Ottoman land. Back to the rum millers. Orthodox Christians were also subject to the cruel death shrine system, where Orthodox families have to forcibly give a few of their sons to the collector to be conscripted to be the Sultan's slave soldiers. Going on to the 16th and 17th century, the Ottomans retook the Peloponnese entirely from the Venetians. Although the Peloponnese were vassals, they were autonomous only for trade, and with this, a few Greeks immigrated to other parts of Europe, forming the first Greek communities in cities like Vienna, Odessa, and Budapest. But due to these losses in territory by the Venetians, the Sublime Porte started heavily taking the Greeks. To escape this heavy taxations, many Greeks retreated to the mountains of the peninsula and became bandits, robbing Ottoman officials going south. With the formation of Greek communities outside of the Ottoman Empire, many people in Western European countries begin to have a keen interest in Greece. These people are often referred to as the Philones. Mostly, they were reminded of ancient Greece's wonders, architecture, and remarkable people like Socrates and Pericles. So they went on visits to Greece. But as they saw their current Ottoman-occupied Greece, they saw the cruel atrocities of the Ottomans and the suffering of the Greeks. One of the most well-known Philones was Lord Byron himself, who would have an important role in the supporting Greeks throughout the war. Many of the Greek communities in Europe, specifically in Odessa, created societies supporting the independence of Greece. The Philikiteria, which translates to Society of Friends, was formed to convince people and draft revolutionaries for a future war of independence for Greece. The most anti-Ottoman feelings sprang up in the Mani Peninsula, the home of the Clefs and the Manians. Before, as an attempt to motivate the revolutionaries in 1786, Empress Catherine of Russia sent a fleet. This rebellion was unsuccessful as the Ottomans sent their janissaries. After that, the inhabiting Greeks faced a reign of terror, where people simply suspected of having rebellious thoughts would be sent to death by impalement. This was one of many events, along with the disappointment of the Hellenes, which convinced the Greeks to fight for independence. The Philokateria chose Alexander Ypsilantis as the leader. In January of 1821, they held a meeting to discuss plans on how to start the revolution. They came up with a strategic plan. The northern Albanian vassal leader, Ali Pasha, was suspected of betraying the Ottomans, and the Ottomans had sent all the soldiers to their vassal states. With the Mani Peninsula and the whole entire Peloponnese left undefended, the Mani Peninsula, on the March of 1821, declared independence from the Ottomans. But there was one major problem. Even with the support of the club's other Greeks and a few Hellenes, the rebels outnumbered by the Ottomans. As the revolt continued in the Mani, Alexander the gave his famous speech. The time has come, O Hellenes. Long ago the people of Europe, fighting for their own rights and liberties, invited us to imitation. The enlightened people of Europe are occupied in restoring the same well-being, and full of gratitude for the benefactions of our forefathers towards them. Desire the liberations of Greece. We, seemingly worthy of ancestral virtue and of their present century, are hopeful that we will achieve their defense and help. Many of these freedom lovers want to come and fight alongside us. Who would then hinder us? Your manly arms. Our cowardly enemy is sick and weak. Our generals are experienced, and all of our fellow countrymen are full of enthusiasm. Unite, then, O brave Greeks. Let national phalanxes be formed. Let patriotic legions appear, and you will see those old giants of despotism fall themselves before our triumphant banners. End quotes. By that point, the Ottomans became aware of this plan and carried out atrocities against Greeks in Constantinople. Churches were destroyed, and people were forcibly converted or put to death if they disagreed, and houses were looted. The ecumenical patriarch, the head of the Greek Orthodox Church, was forced to excommunicate the revolutionaries, against his will, by the Ottoman officials. Even after being forced to obey Ottoman instructions, Ecumenical Patriarch Gregory V was hanged to death on Easter Sunday. This followed with the beheading of the Greek Grand Dragoman Constantinos Mazuris. Majority of the Greek population in Constantinople was massacred. There are many other atrocities, like the later horrifying Chios massacre, which had the Ottomans ruthlessly massacre and enslave everyone, even children and infants, along with forced conversion to Islam. Across the Isthmus of Corinth, outside the center of the revolution, Peloponnese, the young leader, Athanadikos, inspired many to join the revolution. He organized a band of a few thousand people and marched southeast. The commanding Ottoman officer in charge of Greece was furious at the rebels and sent a large army of soldiers led by Omer Vironi, who marched south to confront Dikos. As the Ottomans were on the verge of defeating the Greeks, Omer Vironi was impressed by Dikos' fighting courage and offered him a high-ranking position in the Ottoman army. If he defeated if he defected to the Ottoman side and converted to Islam, Dikos declined this offer, famously stating, "I was born a Greek, I will die a Greek." The furious Omer Vironi, after hearing these words, captured Dikos and sentenced him to death by impalement. Even though the Ottomans continued these atrocities on the Greece itself was finally an independent nation, solidified by the Greek National Assembly in Epidaurus in 1822. This text was very influential. It showed to Europe the rights that the people in a country deserve and the responsibility of the government to protect the people and their rights. But there were many more battles to fight and many more cruel atrocities on the Greeks. But at last, Greece was independent from the brutal occupation of Constantinople. The unfair treatment of Greeks in the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman reign of terror on the Greeks, to the horrifying Chios massacre of Constantinople, and the brutal killing of Athanasius Diakos. The Greek Revolution is a reminder of the basic rights of the subjects to live free of fear and torture, and the responsibilities of the rulers to uphold and protect these rights.